Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. Earth, it's growing on me. And literally speaking, it's growing. Abundance, all in one. Review, what do you need to know? Where are things at? Is it growing on you? Should it be growing on you? What does the expansion bring? Does it change the dynamic? Or is it not going to change your mind if you already have a strong opinion one way or the other? Well, let me tell you my thoughts. Let me run you down what you need to know. Let's go. So the concept is simple. This is an engine building King Domino style 4x4 grid card making layout with multiple ways of comboing, chaining, engine building along the way. The game is really a crux of 4 different actions that you're going to be utilizing on a turn-by-turn basis with the ability to follow along as other people do theirs to activate your Tableau on your turn as well as theirs. How efficient can you run it? Order matters. Placement matters. Resources matter. But is it too much? Is it just right? Is it Goldilocks and the 3 bears of engine building? Yes, this is the stack of cards that comes with the base game. This is an absolutely massive elephant in the room. It is by far and away the most divisive element of this game because you are cycling through these cards trying to get combinations of sets of colors that go along with what you're trying to do in a mitigation schemed engine build, if you will. On the table in front of me, you see the 2 main boards that you're going to be utilizing next to, apart from your 4x4 card-based grid that you're slowly creating. And these represent the different ways that you're going to be scoring individually as well as collectively. Collectively, over here, you have your asymmetric objectives, you have different environmental concerns, and then you also have your own individual board with your own objective, your own environmental conditions, and your own starting island to match. So some of these end game or individual scoring objectives that you can achieve along the way, just for illustration point, 5 cards with at least 2 abilities, 7 flora, each with at least 1 growth on them. And so mixing and matching the growth, the sprouts, the abilities, everything that you may need, different geographic terms, 9+ cards with soil at least costing of 3. It just gives you a complete smattering of everything that you could think of from these aspects. Again, similarly on the other side of the board with the environments and the ecosystems here, again, having enough abilities, having enough flora, how you choose, where you choose to do it, you get to pick. Where do you want to have the emphasis? And all of that just comes to say that it's get cards, play cards, resource mitigate from one of several different ways. So what is the 4 action system that drives this? Well, you get to place 2 cards, paying your soil, drawing 4, keeping 1. Everyone else can do something similar. Then getting said soil and then allowing you to take 2 cards, place them on your compost, which is a whole nother aspect of, point utilization and scoring from that aspect of things. All other people, get your soil, get your compost. Then you're going over and you're getting watering and you're getting sprouts. Get 6 sprouts, place them wherever there's empty spots, and you can get 2 more soil. Everybody else, soil or sprouts. And then the last one, draw 4 cards. Get 2 growth on any of your flora with growth. Then everybody else, draw 2 cards, place 2 growth. That is how it drives things. Everything goes through those 4. Now with abundance giving you germinate too. You've got your sprouts, you've got your growth, you've got your soil, intermixing, interconverting, using one to do another to then chain into another. How and when you choose to use which action may benefit you significantly, or it may also benefit the person's tableau that you're playing against. And with abundance here, we're talking about one main new mechanism called seeds as a resource, germinate as an action. We'll talk about that in a second. This game essentially is just that, personified with these cards. All of these cards have a cost in soil, a victory point if you grow them high enough, how many it needs to be grown, and then the places that you can store those sprouts or the actions that are going to be based on the colors of the individual player actions that will be activated as you go along. So anytime somebody plays yellow, I either get my main yellow action or I get my secondary yellow action followed by activating cards on my tableau. A lot of them are just single color only, as you can see. But as you start skimming through this deck further and further, you're going to start to see that we have multicolor cards as well. They're going to activate on many different actions. And therein lies the balance. But the trickiest aspect of this is not having those cards. It's how the tableau activates. Top to bottom, left to right. So you go just like you're reading a normal book page. And if you don't have them in the right order, your engine is going to suffer. How spatially adept are you as you're utilizing the main action to plant the cards, paying soil, and laying them down in your Tableau grid? Because you have to lay adjacent. You have to lay orthogonal or diagonal to a previous card that is laid. And therein lies the spatial as well as the situational engine build that you're trying to do simultaneously. Do you like the Luxifications? It comes with them as resources that you can get in spades here. They're fantastic. They're wooden. They kind of sort of work for the most part. They sometimes some balancing issues if you're like me and fat fingers, but that is the game in a nutshell. You're doing one to the next, to the next, to the next. And not only similar to these wooden tokens, the game stacks upon itself as well. And this is both the biggest blessing and biggest curse of this game in a whole, is that there's a lot going on. This is the penultimate engine builder in how much engine you can be running. For anyone that says that the engine is never just getting quite to where you want it to be, this is the game for you. This is a game that will allow you to run your engine and burn it essentially to the ground with how many times you're going to have to do it, mitigate it, as well as just kind of remember what's going on a turn-by-turn basis. And this expansion both offers a blessing and a curse from that aspect. It gives you a mitigation. It gives you the seed mechanic, which allows you to get seeds and then germinate. And you can transform those seeds into many other of the resources, much more of a wide variety than you would otherwise with any of the main resources in the base game, which again broadens the horizons of what you can do. But then it also gives you a new mechanic in the Germinate, which just basically allows you to go, I'm looking for this specific mechanic on a card. Flip the deck up and say, up, I found it right there. I get this card, which may sound a little bit trivial. And again, the biggest barrier to this mechanic as a whole is how many mechanics are there? Something like 20 different mechanics, because, you know, you're looking for one specific action scheme on the bottom of the card saying, I want this particular thing doing this. And it gives you a lot of variability. So if you know what you're looking for, it's fantastic, especially at the late game situations where you're trying to be the first one to fill up your 4x4 tableau, because they've also said, hey, guess what? Not only are you going to get 7 points for filling up your tableau first, you're actually going to get 11 with the expansion. Because of the use of the leaves and the seeds interacting at the end, it actually can get, you know, almost anyone extra victory points. So they've done a little bit of hedging on that to make it worthwhile to be the first one to finish as well. Right up front here, if you didn't like this base game, this expansion is not going to change your mind in any way, shape, or form, because your main criticisms were probably, I didn't like how the engine worked. There are too many cards, too much randomness for me to get the cards that I want, and I'm just never going to get it. Well, the Germinate mechanic's going to help you, but you also have to take the first one that has that mechanic. So if you're not specific enough, if you don't know what you're looking for enough, or somebody's already drawn it, your mileage may still be amiss from that side of things, and it may not help you in any other significant way. The Germinate action, though, is very, very useful. It also has an additional element to the expansion that is a little bit more interactive. And so mainly the only thing that might change your mind is if you want more tableau management with your opponents. And this is both a blessing and a curse, because there are going to be cards or aspects now that are dependent on your opponent's tableaus, not just your own. So we're getting a little less multiplayer solitaire with a little bit more, you know, touch and go solitaire, if you will. And what I mean by that, for example, is you've got a few example cards here, right? This now means your neighbors will all get +2, or your neighbor's going to get +1, or when you do that for your neighbor, when it's played. So you're getting a lot more of this interactive element depending on who's next to you, how much they have next to you, and what you want next to you as well. So that may behoove you. It's going to offer a little bit more interaction and dependence on other people's tableaus, but you'll also see that a lot of those cards were split. So it wasn't necessarily that you don't get a significant benefit, but that it's going to be a shared mutual benefit, the opposite of a mutual destruction, if you will. Now, if you don't want a big card tableau in front of you, they've also given you a little handy dandy portable version of it. But therein lies both the blessing and the curse of this, is that this expansion comes with a 6th player, essentially, content. And it's my big criticism for the very similar game with Cascadia, in the sense that, you know what? I really am not a big fan of bundling player count expansions with gameplay content expansions. And so for me, I have absolutely no interest in that. And I wonder, again, just as a consumer, price point wise, if those could be separated out and just, do that sort of thing. Because also my preferred player count at this is no more than 3, to be frank, because otherwise I do personally feel like it gets a little bit long. And that's maybe more of a reflection of who I play with and the scheming that goes along with that that's necessary. Because with a gamer group, this game is going to be, a smooth engine. With people that aren't as familiar niche in the hobby, waist deep, it's going to be a lot more to take in. I mean, there's a reason why they don't suggest to start out with all the Tableau stuff, because it's going to be overwhelming. I mean, and that's sort of how my wife felt with some of these elements, as well as when we added the landmarks into Cascadia. Some inevitably just feel a little bit more that I'm gravitating towards, right? I don't want to say useful, but it wasn't anything like Cascadia landmarks, where you can just kind of not play with the landmarks even when they're in the game, but it just doesn't necessarily pull you as much if you're really rushing to get things done towards the end. Again, like optimization versus race. How big a factor or feature is that for you as a whole? Because I feel like, in my opinion, this would be a perfect game if it was under an hour in that sense. But when you hit past 3, especially now with the expansion interaction, so you're having to account for all of your colors on your turn and on other people's turns. Now you're having to account for the ones that do next to you. So if you have sort of the Ring of Honor circle going on in a 4, 5, or even 6 player game, everybody's going to be looking left and looking right and trying to mitigate that and deal with that as a whole. And so that's going to add to gameplay length. And so the one thing I was kind of hoping, in a sense, of expansions nowadays is sometimes streamlining it just a little bit. And so it doesn't change the drastic gameplay whatsoever, right? You utilize your leaves, you put them over here to score, you use your leaf to follow along whoever's going over here, and you're getting the very good sense of an individual snappy turn-by-turn basis. But when the tableaus themselves sometimes get activated, the deeper the game goes on, it sort of becomes like a pool, if you will. If you think about how a pool looks on the surface, very flat, very even, very straightforward. But then you don't realize that if you could walk on the bottom of the pool, it slowly just goes down and gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's how I feel like the depth of the turns kind of does one of those as well too, as you go longer in the game. And the less familiar you are with this game, the longer and longer it's going to take to try and just figure out all of the possibilities that you can do. So this is a game, although it is fantastic on the surface, it really requires that same depth of play. And what I mean by that is the repeated numbers of play to get the full advantage of it. And again, I don't mind this deck, right? As the main criticism. When the main criticism is that there's too many cards and there's too much randomness with this, I look at games nowadays that have the opposite problem. I look at Veil of Eternity, for example, that I saw and reviewed earlier this year, where you get through the deck completely and you've seen every card after like one playthrough. And by the second game, almost, you're metagaming in that way. Whereas with this, I'd rather have the opposite problem. I'd rather have too much randomness, too much, I don't know what's all in there and the craziness that comes with that, rather than I'm going for this one specific card that's going to make it or break it for my strategy. And we all know that we all are going for something very similar in that sense. and just the craziness. So I don't mind the fact that you add another like a third worth of cards here to the top either. I don't mind that at all. You give me a few more environment cards. You give me a few more asymmetric point condition cards. You give me a few more island cards to give me a mix and a match. I am happy. I'm satisfied. And that's why, again, this game has grown on me. And I feel like it will continue to grow on me with more plays. I mean, where is the ceiling going to be for this game, though? I don't know. Because, again, it has to be the right fit for the right group. This is not a casual, pull it out randomly at game night. The actions themselves are simplistic. And this is where the blessing curse is, right? The rule book is thin. The actions themselves are incredibly straightforward. But how you utilize them, both as a blessing and a curse, like in an El Grande Hansa Teutonica sort of similar vibe, that is where, again, that deepness comes in. And sometimes you have a situation at a group or a game night where that's going to be just the perfect swimming environment. And it's also going to drown people that aren't used to this as well. And you need to be very careful about selecting who and what and how you're playing this as a whole. Because it can absolutely soar in the right context, but it can also fall flat if people just feel completely overwhelmed, which it can do with the sheer plethora, not only from this sheer number, but the combination that you have available to you in a multitude of ways. So final thoughts here. Again, it's not going to change your mind unless you want more of people being able to play off each other's tableaus in a little bit of sense. If you didn't have enough mitigation, the Germinate, I'm going to argue, probably still isn't quite enough based on the limited or semi-limited use or gathering of seeds in the first place. The other boon I didn't really mention is that you can store sprouts now as another way of scoring victory points, which again, if you didn't have enough space for them before, this kind of, again, gives you a little bit of a positive aspect of that if you didn't like it. But it's another way to get those seeds to allow you to mitigate, but is it going to be enough trading victory points back and forth in one way or the other to complete your engine or to efficiently manage it in that sense? The absolute blessing of this game is that it is probably, from a sheer volume side of things, the largest, most well-rounded, complete engine builder in that sense. 4 actions, 4 straightforward tasks, but taking them all individually, allowing manipulation, allowing repetitive use in how you design it, and limiting it to a 4x4 grid, which on the surface, when you first start out, sounds very, very small, and you realize how overwhelming it is by the end of the game. And that is, again, in a blessing curse style of things, going to be an awesome feature of things to see how much you can do that. Or it's going to be overwhelming with how many times you're going to have to be counting this, that, the other, drawing, mitigating, resource changing, all in a turn by turn by turn by turn, to the point of maybe making a little bit too much of a crawl for you at the end. So if you liked it, this is going to be better. If you didn't like it, it's not going to change your mind. As I alluded to at the beginning, though, this game, you know what? I'll say I was wrong. I'll fall on my sword and say, I didn't give this game enough credit. The more I've played it, the more I've enjoyed it. What is its ceiling for me, though? I don't know. Because again, if I could guarantee that every game was going to be under 60 minutes, boom, I would be over the moon with this game. This game would be a top one all time. But especially at the higher player counts, it's going to limit me probably only wanting to play it with 2 or 3. And so at higher player counts, I'm going to look elsewhere. So those are my feelings on it. Earth with the abundance, like I said, it's growing on me. I'm done with the bad puns. There you go. Hey, stay classy. Thanks for watching. Inside Up Games, thank you for sending it to me in the first place. There you go. Check it out if you want on crowdfunding. Thanks for watching. Stay classy. Have a great freaking fantastic day.